When I was 12 years old, I attempted possibly the most ambitious visual effects shot in film history that would have had the masters at ILM scratching their heads as to how I achieved it.
Would you like me to shoot you? Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Hi, I'm James Ken. Yes, thank you. And this is episode 1 of a new series where I'm going to be recreating my old visual effects as well as visual effects from film and TV. Naturally, there are some issues with the old scene. For example, the aspect ratio changes throughout. That wasn't some artistic choice I was doing. I was just being a fool. I just didn't realise. You may have also noticed that I just straight up leaned into the bullet. I guess I wanted to get some momentum or something to flick my head back. I was just like... And it's just silly. You know, now after many years of getting shot in the head, I know how to do it correctly. For the actual headshot effect, I just put a lens flare on my forehead. I don't know why I did that. Doesn't really make sense. But obviously the main offender is the bullet itself. Not only is it just massive, it's not even a bullet, it's the entire round. Like, I'm no gun expert, but I'm pretty sure the shell gets ejected. Now to recreate this, I've got to get into costume. It was then time to recreate my Oscar-winning acting.
Would you like me to shoot you? Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
You can probably tell that back then I was such a talented writer, you know? I wrote my characters with such depth. So for this effect, I wanted it to play out in super slow motion. However, I don't have a camera that shoots in super slow motion. So I decided to act in super slow motion. I opened my shot up inside of Hitfilm Pro and picked the best take. To start off, I simply hand-tracked the muzzle of the gun by using a point. In After Effects, you would use a null object. I headed over to Action VFX and grabbed one of their slow motion muzzle flashes and placed it in my shot, linking it to my tracked point so it moves with the gun. I added some additional glow to it and set it to a screen blending mode. I then used a grade layer, or an adjustment layer if you're in After Effects, with a displacement effect using the muzzle flash as the source layer so the background is distorted. I just think this makes it look super cool. I also motion tracked my eyeballs and placed the muzzle flash in them to make it look like my eyes are reflecting it. I added another grade layer with an add blending mode, masking it around the parts that should be lit up and keyframing the opacity over time. And for the bullet shell that flies out of the gun, I will talk about it in a minute. Literally 1 minute from now, I'll talk about it, promise. I then needed to get some shots of the bullet slowly moving towards my head. For these, I could literally just get away with using a freeze frame of my head. For the bullet 3D model, I went to productioncrate.com. I then moved into Blender and set up the materials of my bullet, making sure to actually get rid of the shell this time. I then simply added a path. I moved into edit mode and aligned it to where I wanted it to be. I added a follow path constraint to my bullet and picked the path as the source. Animate path. If your bullet is going the wrong way, select the path and move into edit mode. Under the overlays drop down menu, turn up the handles, move over to segments and then switch direction. I then gave the bullet some slight rotation to make it look like it's spinning, and to be honest, you can't even really tell in the final thing. For the other angles of the bullet, I just simply moved Blender's virtual camera into their new positions. Okay, bullet shell. I got a freeze frame of my face, imported my bullet into Blender, but this time I hid the bullet and just kept the shell. I then just keyframed the shell's rotation and position over time to make it look like it was ejecting from the gun. It took a few attempts and lots of trial and error to make a motion that I was happy with, but I got there in the end. So, moving on to the lighting. I used a 360 image of my kitchen as a HDRI to give the bullet the correct reflections and make it feel like it was really there. For the 360 image, I used a GoPro Hero Max. If you don't have a 360 camera, you could easily find a HDRI off of Polyhaven that closely resembles your scene. I also added a sunlight to give it a bit of extra brightness on the side of the bullet. For For the shot of the shell that was close to the muzzle flash, I added an additional point light near it with an orange colour to make it appear as if it was being lit by the flash. And I just used the exact same shell animation for this shot. I just scaled it down and sped it up a bit. For this bullet trail effect, I added an icosphere and parented it to the bullet using Ctrl P. A particle system was added to the icosphere to create this trail. Make sure to turn up the lifetime of your particles so they don't disappear throughout the scene, and turn off velocity and gravity. I created this cylinder-shaped disc thing and set it as the object that the particle simulation would render as. I then rendered out this bullet trail animation, and in Hitfilm I used it as a displacement map on a grade layer to distort the background footage. Very nice. And finally I had a shot where I had to get shot. So I simply got a blood splatter effect from Action VFX, aligned it to my fridge, set it to a multiply blending mode, masked myself out, gave it a bit of blur, and dropped the opacity a bit. Done. Then after a bit of sound design and editing, we get this.
Would you like me to shoot you? Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
And there we have it. And yes, I know, I left an effect out of my explanation, and that is the bullet going through my skull. I wanted it to be a surprise. So for that, I simply just added a plane and lined it up to the position of my forehead. In the object properties, I then set it as a shadow catcher. So that's how I did that. And yeah, that's all there is. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.